Доброго дня, шановні наші.
Good afternoon, dear guests, dear spectators online. Ukrainian Crisis Media Center starts its work today, and I'm happy to announce the beginning of the National Platform of Resilience and Cohesion press briefing. Good afternoon, dear participants of today's event of the National Platform of Resilience and Cohesion. Together with you today, we'll try to analyze, to think together about the fact what's going on with us today in the 32nd year of Ukraine's independence, at the level of authorities, at the level of the regions, etc. I believe that this year we have surprised the entire global community and ourselves with many things. The Independence Day is on approach, and those who are willing to watch the parade, they are welcome with some specific features of this parade. This is a parade of the burnt Russian weaponry. And Ukraine is very much concerned and ready to commemorate forever the memory of Mariupol, Berdyansk, Chernihiv, that is, both Western and Eastern Ukraine is united in its willingness to fight and what is your assessment of what's going on? What forecast you can do for the future in the light of the issues that and challenges that we are facing today? It's my pleasure to give the floor to Volodymyr Lupatsii, who will describe what we have been experiencing and understanding today. We have gathered this platform, brought together all the regions to allow the regions to face each other, to see each other, and to speak one voice. Of course, the war had united us immensely, and Ukrainians had realized the importance of the state authority. And this is the key characteristic of Ukrainians, which these days is perceived. The main characteristic of Ukrainians is resilience, and after a short and unsuccessful blitzkrieg, Russia tries to impose this war to test Ukrainians' resilience, and today we come together to discuss what the resilience means for us. What do we mean under this word? Oleh Saakian, the third co-founder of the National Platform on of Resilience and Cohesion. Thank you, Yulia. I would like to note that our today's event is broadcast both in Ukrainian and in English, and I encourage you to switch between the channels in case of need. And thank you for participating in these discussions, and my special thanks to the regions. Quite often we focus quite narrowly on the framework and border within the borders of the capital of Kiev, and this creates the distortions of optics, and we quite often focus on the front line and try to trace back what's going on along the contact line, what are our military successes, etc. But the middle level, the level between the top authorities of the state and the front line, which are the, so to say, the grassroots. So the middle level, the regions, it remains beyond the focus of our attention. And today we decided to focus more on the regions, to ask the local leaders about the challenges that they face, the challenges faced by local communities, local businesses, and local civil society. We have a front line, we have pre-front areas, and we have the areas in the rear, which are far away from the front line. And in this period, before the Independence Day, before the anniversary of Ukrainian independence, we would like to make an overview of the practices that exist in the regions. Let us discuss these positive practices. Let us analyze the a vision from the experts, what's going on in the regions and what are the needs of the regions as we see them. It seems to me that the needs have been changing now and then, and we would like to know what are the responses of local authorities, of local businesses, of local civil societies. And based on that, our resilience is shaped. Now we have representatives from the Donetsk region military administration. My first question is to you. Of course, the war in this country had started not on February 24th. It had started long ago, back in 2014. It began with the occupation of some regions of Donetsk region. For you, whether we have Donetsk regional military administration connected, whether they are able to speak now, please give us a sign. Let's make a short pause, and during this pause, I'd like to give the floor to Andriy Romanenko, regional coordinator of the National Platform of Resilience and Cohesion in Donetsk Oblast. Andriy, you're welcome. Good afternoon. I hope that you can hear me well. I'm happy that we have this discussion about resilience and cohesion in this time of war. I would like to present the update for the last 6 months. You're quite right that the war have been lasting here for more than 8 years now, but during the last 6 months, it had reactivated. Approximately 60% of the region is being occupied, but on the rest, 40% of the region, the life continues. First, I would like to point to that we have a strong authority here. We have the military administration of the region and of the and local military administrations. They were formed immediately upon the beginning of the full-fledged war, and the major task of these authorities now is not just to maintain the life on these territories, but also to organize proper evacuation of almost 2/3 of the population from these territories evacuated, but 1/3 is 1/3 remains, and the evacuation there is compulsory now because there is no heating there, and only up to 200,000 people are allowed to stay in this territory. These are those who will support the existence of those territories and those enterprises which cannot be evacuated. Only for them some sort of heating will be provided. Now Donetsk region population is being evacuated to Ivano-Frankivsk and Kirovohrad regions. In Pokrovsk city, the evacuational trains start, and they head to the western regions, first to Kramatorsk, then after intensive shellings of Kramatorsk, the evacuation hub was transferred to Slavyansk, and we all remember terrible shelling of Kramatorsk when several dozens of peaceful people were destroyed, were wounded, were killed. That was a huge tragedy. Actually, there's had shown that those who successfully escaped from Volnovakha, from Liman, which had been intensively shelled, they suffered again in the hubs, and the hubs were then transferred, evacuational hubs were then transferred to the Dnipro city. People who stay in Donetsk Oblast, they survive in extremely hard conditions. They do not have proper water supplies, proper electricity supplies. When the winter comes, there is a threat to remain without heating, with the interrupted electricity, etc. But nevertheless, the life here in the region continues, and people more and more understand that cohesion is the only chance to survive here, and this is quite clearly understood both in urban and rural communities, and this is the main feature brought by the war to the region. Could you please add something, any comment about temporary occupied areas of the region? During the last 6 months, what has changed there? During the last 6 months, several big regions were included into the occupied territory. These are Mariupol city, Volnovakha city, and Liman. But actually, all those cities are totally ruined, and all the attempts to create the local authorities there by the occupants are unsuccessful. We have just several cases of collaboration from the number of occupants, but the bigger territory of that newly occupied territories, they are without water supplies. In the previously occupied territories, which were occupied long ago, for them everyday existence is a bit easier, but for newly occupied territories, there is a total humanitarian crisis. We saw a lot of cases when local people had to escape from the occupied territories via Russian territory through St. Petersburg to Europe and then back to Ukraine. At the beginning of occupation, there were some possibilities for Ukrainians to escape this way, but now local people can escape from the occupied territories only to Russian territory. In general, the situation is terrible. Thank you for your comments. Today we have connected our colleagues from the Lugansk, Zaporizhia, Mykolaiv, Odesa regions, as well as the regions of Lviv, Chernivtsi, and Transcarpathian. I would like to give the floor to Olena Niezhelska, regional coordinator of the platform from Lugansk region. Olena is in Siversky Donetsk. Thank you. Unfortunately, the sound is terribly interrupted. I would like to say a couple of words about situation in Lugansk region. Could you please reconnect, because the connection is terrible. We almost cannot hear you. In the meanwhile, when Olena is reconnecting for the second time, I would like to give the floor to Anatoly Boyko, our regional coordinator from Odesa. Anatoly, could you say a couple of words from Odesa? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Thank you. The Russian ships had lost their patience and retreated from Odesa. You have started this event with a statement that Ukrainians surprised the entire world with its resilience. As for me, I was hugely surprised by Odesa with its resilience. Odesa region preserves a rather high level of social resilience and cohesion. We do not have any conflicts between the branches of authorities inside the region. We have neither social nor ethnical conflicts. On the other side, we feel strong leadership from the side of local governments. I hear saying that, I mean, small local communities, pre-Danube communities who adopted huge numbers of internally displaced people. When people were fleeing from Mariupol and Kherson and other areas, they found shelter in the south of Odesa region. Then the next aspect is a powerful volunteer movement in Odesa region. I understand that this is not purely Odesa regional phenomenon, but what I can observe in our region is that volunteering community is extremely well organized, well structured, and rather strong. Nevertheless, I would like to point out some risks. On the one hand, this is the risks of military attack. On the one hand, we are very grateful to Mykolaiv, which defends us against the direct military attacks. On the other hand, we understand that we have to take a proactive approach ourselves, defending the coastline. And additionally, and despite a strong leadership, we see limited access to public information, which creates some risks like abuse of public finance management, etc. Another risks are related to possibilities of disinformation, because in the south of the region people can watch Russian TV channels via Sputnik, and another way of propaganda, Russian propaganda, another big channel is the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Russian Patriarchy, which was quite influential in the south and in the region. And we have to think about these risks and understand what to do. We have to tackle the economic issues because of the blockade of the seaports, and this directly results in the decline in well-being of people, then military risks, and the negative impact of hostile disinformation. And these are main sources of our concerns. So these are the issues on which I would like to focus your attention. Thank you, Anatoly. Thank you for pointing out to the threats of unconventional war, of the hybrid war. We observe once again the attempts of proxy influences. This remains in the focus of our attention, both of our and your attention. Thank you for your contribution to today's discussion. For this short presentation, now we have Elena Nizelska. This is the second attempt to connect and to hear Olena's presentation? Thank you. I would like to try without video. This will improve the sound. Thank you. So let's come back to Lugansk region. In the Lugansk region may show broad spectrum of different situations. Some communities in Lugansk regions were occupied in 2014. Some communities in Lugansk region were occupied in March without intensive combats. And there are some communities which were occupied in result of fierce fighting, and this resulted in total destroy of the local communities. They are destroyed by 70, 80, 95%, like Popasna. And in all those different communities, the life is different, of course, and the needs of people are different. Those communities which were occupied back in 2014, before the beginning of full-scale invasion, the key challenges in those communities are forced mobilization by Russians and actually, during all the 8 years, the situation with human rights in those localities was terrible, had been terrible. But during the last 6 months, it worsened considerably. As for those communities which were occupied without fierce fighting, the situation is is as follows. There we observed a strong peaceful resistance where people organized peaceful demonstrations demonstrating against Russian troops in Novopskov, Starobelsk and other communities, and in Novopskov, Russian troops started to use arms against small arms against participants of that peaceful actions. Also, it was Lugansk region which was shelled among the first targets at the dawn of February 24th. When the region was occupied, the compulsory imposing of new authorities started. From some localities, people even didn't manage to evacuate. They were occupied very quickly. Hirska, Popasnyanska, Lysychanska, Severodonetska community, Kremenska community, all those communities terribly suffered from combats. And people survived through terrible conditions during the 6 months. First, they found themselves in the midst of fierce fighting. For example, in Popasna, shellings lasted for 23 hours per day. And during only 1 hour per day, they were able to experience quietness. Some people had to relocate and survive in extremely bad conditions. And many people took decision about evacuation. In the regions of intensive combats, only 10% of population remain. The best examples of social cohesion we showed during evacuation the well-coordinated united action of the volunteers, the local self-government, central state authorities, the evacuation from almost all the communities was successfully organized. The special difficulties existed for immobile people, people with limited mobility. For those people, it was extremely difficult, extreme hardships to be evacuated after long time spent in bunkers and cellars. Those cities and towns which are almost totally ruined, they are not subject to quick restoration. Of course, there won't be no heating during winter season. It is not possible to imagine how people will survive there because the objects of critical infrastructure are totally ruined. No gas supplies, no water supplies, no heat supplies, no sewage, etc. And what is even more important, that heroic resistance demonstrated by Luhansk region allowed the country, allowed Ukraine to concentrate its resources. Fierce fighting for each small city, each small town in the region. Became the name of heroic fight. This does not prevent Lugansk region from occupation, but allowed the country and military command to concentrate efforts. And now, when the enemy try to undertake new attacks, they have no strength anymore, and Ukraine has to remember about this huge heroic deed of Lugansk region. The enemies expected that the residents of Luhansk region were happy to welcome the occupants. The majority of population escaped, and those people who escaped became IDPs. They observed the ruination of their homes online. And the scattered residents of Lugansk region now require help and assistance, but we are very much committed to rebuild our region and to come back to our places of residence. Thank you, Olena. Thank you for that experience that you shared with you. This terrible experience is part of our common experience. We have to remind every day about that humanitarian crisis and humanitarian tragedy of the region, which sacrificed itself for the sake of rescuing the entire country. Despite all the referenda organized by the occupants, despite all the forced evacuations, despite all the violations of human rights, we remember about those people. And now I would like to give the floor to Mykhailo Zolotukhin, who is our regional coordinator of the national platform in Mykolaiv region. In Mykolaiv, the situation is extremely tough. Today, your colleagues from Odesa region mentioned you, and we all hear everyday news about regular shellings of Mykolaiv. Could you please inform us about this situation? Good afternoon. I am here in Mykolaiv. Speaking about resilience and cohesion, I should say that Mykolaiv, Voznesensk, and the Bashtan communities demonstrated brightly the examples of cohesion. Back in March, we managed to organize local territorial defense. Of course, the armed forces of Ukraine played their role, but we contributed much to that defense. Snegurevska territorial community is now under occupation, but they also showed strong resilience. We observed strong volunteering, strong cohesion of civil society, local small and medium-sized businesses organized support to the warriors of the armed forces, to local residents. In some communities, we saw very strong volunteering movement. We have the cases when volunteering movement reached its peak in March. But at the same time, we have counter stories how it's going on now. I would like to thank to the local military administration who managed to preserve the infrastructure. I would like to thank them for the raising morale of local population. Local authorities organize local volunteers. And local regional government very much appreciates the work of volunteers. But I have a comment to the local authorities. We would like to know more about budgetary process. Only in August we had remained, we only received the budget for the current year. Currently we observe the activities of expert community under the Mykolaiv Regional Council who undertake audit, civil society audit of budget management in the region. In Voznesensk region, we have a network of volunteering centers. We see good cases of synergy in rural areas. In Mykolaiv, we have a center for coordination of local businesses and support from local businesses. And also we have the issues with water supplies, and there's required high degree of cohesion to resolve the issue of water supplies of salt, at least salt water supplies from Liman. We have issues with potable water. We have three major areas here: the area of active combats, the area of semi-active combats, and the area which stays beyond the fighting. And in current conditions, we continue to fight. And we understand that we have to adapt to the current situation to ensure proper functioning of local self-governments, to revive normal life here. And we have not relied on the local authority, also have not relied on the central authorities. Currently, we have a strong demand on revival of the local authorities, and these days, international donors are ready to provide proper funding to strengthen institutional capacity of those authorities. And of course, we have to overcome Russians in this aggression, and we have to overcome ourselves in our bad organization, in our laziness, in our unwillingness to improve ourselves. I believe that in this period we observe positive trends in cohesion, and we have to strengthen public oversight over local self-governments. Oh, and local self-governance is called not only redistribute and coordinate the humanitarian aid. We are very grateful to the UN programs for humanitarian aid, but local authorities have to become preoccupied with creation of new jobs in the first turn, because this is the pledge of our survival. And without creation of new jobs, we won't be able to survive. We are being shelled intensively, and despite of all those shellings, we have to find the ways to survive proactively on the basis of creating new jobs. Thank you, Mykhailo. Thank you for raising this issue about current challenges, and thank you for reminding us about reforms, improvements, monitoring, audit of financial management, etc. Actually, this strengthens our resilience. This is the focus which we should keep in mind always. In Luhansky, Donetsk region, Mykolaiv region, and in Zaporizhia region, the humanitarian situation is extremely difficult. And looking on that regions, we have to keep in mind what is important for us. And I think the points that you made during your intervention are very useful in this understanding where we are. Moving from the east of the country to the south and then to the west, I'm very pleased to give the floor to Mr. Dmytro Arabadji, who is regional coordinator of the National Platform of Resilience and Cohesion in Zaporizhia Oblast. In Zaporizhia region remained one of the front posts of Russian aggression for 8 years, but today we observe the direct aggression against the region. What is your feeling about what's going on? Thank you, Yulia. I wish to everybody a victory and to gain peace in this order. We started to surprise from February 24th, and we continue doing that. The level of restraint, the level of counteraction, the level of fight remains rather high. The front line had not moved during that the 6 months. We restrained the enemies near Gulaipole, which are only 6 kilometers from the front line. This is a dangerous distance for shellings, and the enemies can easily shell our pre-border communities, and even the center of the region, Zaporizhia, is rather close to the front line. Of course, anti-air defense is very operational and very instrumental, but nevertheless, the danger is huge. The fierce fighting is going on the perimeter of the eastern perimeter of the region, and many cities are almost totally destroyed. As for life support, so to say, provision for life in the occupied, in the territories, we have two focuses: defense and survival. But the new tasks continue to arise. As of now, we observe how the Russians are threatening nuclear security and safety with the occupation of the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. The regional authorities pay much attention to preparation to the heating season, and in the occupied territories, there is no gas supply. So this is very much similar to Lugansk and Donetsk regions. And after several meetings with the regional local authorities and school authorities, we made a final decision to start new school year online, because we do not have enough bomb shellings, bunkers in the schools. Out of 68 up to 64 local communities are under occupation, and nevertheless, the resilience is demonstrated by the leaders of those regions who evacuated from their community. They continue to provide the pensions to their regions. Some heads of local self-governments in evacuation, they continue to organize proper evacuation and contribute to the work of IDP hubs. We have 3 strong IDP hubs in Zaporizhia city, where we provide assistance to displaced people. More than 190,000 of evacuated people are registered in Zaporizhia. Local kindergartens became local hubs. During fierce fighting in Zaporizhia region, when the green corridors of the Red Cross were operational during Mariupol, the flow of displaced people was at the level of 3,000-4,000 people per day. Also, I would like to point out to you such a feature of resilience and cohesion as a repair workshop of military equipment. Zaporizhia region remains the only occupational corridor for the IDPs from occupied territories in the south. We continue to accommodate up to 1,500 IDPs per day coming from Mariupol, although the Russians try to create all sorts of objectives for people who are escaping. This is the road of life, so to say, the path of life. We observe thousands of cars in long lines without water, without toilets, without sewage, in terrible sanitary conditions. They call it the path of life, but and we have to accommodate these people. We have made in even a know-how in the area of hubs for IDPs. Thus, we have hubs for Mariupol, for Pologiv, for Vasiliev communities, and now a special hub for the IDPs from Kherson region. The specificity, the very specific feature of those hubs is that in those hubs, the evacuated previously residents of Pologi, Mariupol, etc., they provide assistance to their fellow mates coming from the same region. Up to 400 local residents were kidnapped, and there are threats to the people, to the parents in the occupied territories who try to prevent their children from attending Russian schools. More than 7,000 tons of grain is being expropriated and theft in the occupied territories every day. Of course, there are some collaborators, traitors, and spies in the occupied territories of the region. We have a terrible problem with employment. We have up to 23 applicants to each vacancy. The set of professions also had changed. We have a huge demand in workers' professions for the revival of infrastructure. Of course, we try to do our best in terms of revival of infrastructure, but the combat activities continue. Some share of the region is without electricity supplies. In the majority of occupied territories, there is no gas supplies, and the heating season, the winter season, is expected to be extremely tough, and local authorities encouraged the residents to evacuate because of that reason. Thank you, Dmytro. I would like to ask a question once again. Could you please describe the morale in the region, especially in connection with the activities of Russian Federation in the occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant? We observe how people sitting on the powder basket, they are making jokes with fires. In result of any nuclear accident in the nuclear power plant, the entire Zaporizhzhia region would become totally impossible for residents. As for the occupied territories, we see good examples of the partisan movement when collaborants are destroyed, like in Melitopol. Of course, the region continues to fight and continues to resist. And this resistance could be seen in the actions on the occupied territories. And at the same time, we try to provide any possible assistance to people, not only in the controlled, but also in the occupied territories. The occupants try to organize a referendum in the occupied territory. They tried to organize a census of the population or a registration of the available population, but fortunately they are quite unsuccessful in all those attempts. For me, it was unpleasant to hear that quite recently there were up to 20 searches, and the corrupt network was discovered, which acted at the cross border front line. And Zaporizhzhia regional administration is found guilty in organizing corrupt scheme for crossing the border of Zaporizhzhia region, who wanted to evacuate. Thank you, Dmytro. Thank you for describing the situation. Thank you for describing the humanitarian aspects and emphasizing challenges related to defense and security. We all know that the situation in the occupied regions of Zaporizhzhia Oblast is at the center of attention globally today. And now I would like to shift to Chernivtsi region. that is to our western regions, which had become the rear of Ukraine, which accepted the flows of IDPs, strong flows of IDPs. What is your view of the situation in Chernivtsi region, that inner processes, the transformation which is going on in the region? Igor, can you hear us? Igor Havrada is the regional coordinator of our platform in Chernivtsi region. Good afternoon. Chernivtsi in the western Ukraine is in a deep rear. On the one hand, this is good. This is good for the residents. On the other hand, this has the inherent threats. I do not wish to be in a role of the Deputy Minister of Internal Affairs, who once mentioned that in Bukovina there were no any military action against the region, but which raised a wave of hate in social media. But on the other hand, Bukovina is rather far away from the front line, but it demonstrates high examples of resilience and cohesion. And those cases prove that the resistance is strong even along the western border of Ukraine. When the full-scale invasion started, the resistance started also, despite the fact that on February 24th, nothing was shelled upon our heads, but the panic was quite obvious. There was panic in the shops. Shop assistants were not able to provide the proper services. The border guards had to tackle the panic at the border with those who wanted to cross the border, etc. A bit later on, we managed to sort out the activities of local authorities. But at the decline of the day on February 24th, Bukovina felt the impact of full-scale invasion when the second wave of IDPs started to cross the border. The first wave of pressure started 2 weeks before the war, when the first waves of IDPs started to arrive, and all the accommodation facilities were rented out. As of now, we have official data that in Chernivtsi region there were just 900,000 people residing in Chernivtsi in 2020. As of now, we have 79,000 people of IDPs, while in the peak we had more than 200,000 of IDPs in the region. But I think all those figures only prove that we have high resilience and cohesion. An IDP is going from Kharkiv, from Mariupol, from Kyiv. We're exhausted with the long road, with long way, which took, in best case, up to half a day, 12 hours, 18 hours. People who were escaping from Mariupol, when they reached Chernivtsi, they were provided with proper accommodation. Local authorities acted in good solidarity without any coordination from the authorities. They managed to organize hubs, centers for arriving IDPs. The region had become a transit region for IDPs. Some people were heading to Ivano-Frankivsk region. Some people were heading to Romania. And one of the cross points with Romania demonstrated very long lines. And now we do not have so many people at the cross point, but we have long lines of trucks and lorries crossing the border. I was very positively surprised with the fact that we had no protests against mobilization. We managed to organize good information and awareness campaigns. Chernivtsi region is a good territory for relocated businesses. We have more than 100 businesses which were relocated to the Chernivtsi region. And at the beginning, and now we have more than 80. Some of those relocated businesses went back. We also have good civil society organizations in evacuation. You have 1 minute more. We have good examples of the grassroots self-organizations. We saw all sorts of civic hotlines supporting those who need help. Thank you so much for the review and for the assistance provided by civil society organizations, civic initiatives, etc. And for assistance provided to IDPs and that huge volume of humanitarian assistance. Our experts and colleagues mentioned about the role of local authorities responding the challenges of IDPs and the humanitarian crisis caused by the war. Nobody waited for special orders of decisions from high authorities. People took initiative and took action at the local level, tackling the rapidly rising issues. And this strengthened local communities, that strengthened interterritorial interaction and allowed to resolve the problems which arrived spontaneously. And now from Chernivtsi region, we move to the Lviv region. I'm happy to give the floor to Ms. Oksana Ivasiv, who's the regional coordinator of the National Platform of Resilience and Cohesion in Lviv Oblast. Oksana, are you here? Thank you, Yulia. I'm happy to welcome everybody. Today we've been discussing resilience and cohesion that we demonstrated from the beginning of the war, and I would like to describe the situation in Lviv region. At the dawn of February 24th, we were awakened with the sounds of blasts. And since that time, we had shown many examples, many cases of solidarity. We adopted the flows of refugees from everywhere. Up to 5 million of Ukrainians had passed through Lviv. Part of those people headed abroad. Part of those people remained in the region, and that became the first challenge for the region. We had to accommodate that people. We had to provide for all their needs. Many of those IDPs, these were families, these were disabled people, pensioners, big families, and people who were unable to evacuate with their pets. They abandoned their pets, and we had to tackle the problem of abandoned animals. Lviv Central Railway Station had become a huge hub, providing initial assistance to the flows of IDPs. Friends, families, relatives of all the Ukrainians from Lviv region, they offered their support and helped. The numbers of IDPs in the Lviv region is very dynamic. Some people return to their homes. Some people stay here in the Lviv region because their homes are either in the occupied territories or are ruined. And even now, we observe between 1 or 2 evacuational trains per day. Lviv region had become a big humanitarian center. We accept the supplies from abroad, and even our women became drivers because men were prohibited from crossing the border. And In Lviv region, almost everywhere we have the humanitarian centers which coordinate fundraising and delivery of procured humanitarian aid to the IDPs and those who became new residents of the of Lviv region. Lviv had become center where humanitarian aid was accumulated and then redistributed all around Ukraine. Lviv military and civil administration contributed much to coordination. All the humanitarian organizations that exist here in the region, they coordinate their work with religious organizations, and altogether they provide a huge volume of support. Also, local businesses contribute much to coordination of assistance via supplies of food, via producing a uniform, etc. We also provide assistance to the international humanitarian organizations arriving to Ukraine. And everywhere volunteers get organized to provide all sorts of help to the front line. As for our educational institutions, hostels, religious organizations, universities, colleges, and schools, they all provided accommodation to IDPs, and on the eve of the new school year, we had to find new accommodation to IDPs to free schools, to empty schools, and prepare them for the school year. This also required provision of additional assistance. As of August 15, the Lviv military administration said that we have 246,000 of IDPs registered in the Lviv region. By the way, from the very first day, we found out an acute need in psychological support, and currently we organize consultancy and advisory psychological centers where we offer assistance to IDPs. A lot of civil society organizations with international support organize such events. We have also the IDP local village where up to 1,000 residents in this village. The biggest problem for IDPs are being resolved by a local program for IDPs. And one of the components of that program is to organize overhaul and repair of premises which might be provided to IDPs being relocated from the schools. We plan to start the school year on September 1st, especially for the schools where bunkers and shelters are available for school children. And to do this, to be able to do this, we have to relocate the IDPs from schools. You have 30 seconds more. I would like to mention about support to businesses. Lviv region is preoccupied with the support of businesses. We have many relocated IDPs, and we have relocated businesses. We have 203 relocated businesses. And this is related to some problems. What else I would like to mention? We organize integrational events for IDPs. I am unable to mention all the integrational initiatives. Those integrational events and measures, they allow to unite not only the IDPs from some specific locality like Mariupol, Popasna, etc., but they also consolidate the residents of the Lviv region and raise solidarity among all the Ukrainians residing in the region now. I also wanted to mention the Russification of streets and the de-Russification of the Church of Russian Patriarch. Thank you for these points. I would like to express huge gratitude to the western regions of Ukraine who managed to accept the huge numbers of IDPs, different people from different regions who were seeking the shelters, who tried to find safe places from shellings, from combats. Thank you for your information about relocated businesses. This raises the issue which we will discuss now, the properties of the rear that exists in Chernivtsi, in Lviv, in Transcarpathian region, which will be our next presentation. So you are the foundation of our further strength. We have Dmytro Tuzhanskyi, Regional Coordinator of the National Platform of Resilience and Cohesion in Transcarpathian region. Good afternoon. I'm happy to join this discussion. Thank you to all the speakers. It is quite interesting discussion. When we look at the Transcarpathian during the last 6 months, we find out a lot of similarities with the Chernivtsi and Lviv regions. And when we compare what we heard in terms of Mykolaiv, Donetsk, not to mention Lugansk region, the situation in Transcarpathian is very much different. Even before the invasion, Transcarpathian started to turn into a place of relocation for businesses, for civil population, for the embassies and the international rep offices. Geographically, Transcarpathian is structurally different from Chernivtsi region and from Lviv regions. Transcarpathian does not have a big megapolis We have Mushgorod and Mukachevo, which are bigger cities, but they are not that big, and mainly we have small mountain communities which are in the mountains. And when those small communities, they become overpopulated, this creates additional problems for them. When we speak about relocation, we should not think about valley communities, which are relatively rich and relatively strong. When we speak about mountain communities, they have their challenges, very specific challenges, and they are rather poor. They have poor infrastructure. They have They are financially much weaker, and when they when they experience the flows of IDPs, they are under big pressure. But nevertheless, all the communities, all the 64 local communities created in result of rather difficult decentralization process and redivision process in Transcarpathian region, they all showed rather high level of resilience, and the Transcarpathia had passed successfully that test, that exam on resilience and high-level support, despite the burden on the budget created by this relocation. Nevertheless, we managed to cope. Transcarpathia is also almost #1 in relocation of businesses. Especially, it had become the center of IT businesses and IT clusters, and number of IT businesses, number of IT offices in Uzhgorod had grown several times. And when we think in terms of taxes and in terms of local budgets, the local authorities are very happy with the budget revenues from taxes to our regional budget. Sometimes Transcarpathia looks like a quiet harbor. Recently, we welcomed Viola von Kramer, the Euro MP, an MP of European Parliament. She is a member of the Ukraine-EU Association. She is quite familiar with Ukraine, with Lviv, with central Ukraine, but she was very much impressed that the war is not felt so much in Transcarpathia. As civil society, we try to make a good use of this opportunity and to strengthen our cooperation with neighbors and with international partners, not only in the context of humanitarian assistance. Although humanitarian assistance continues to arrive, and not only from our neighbors from Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, but also we have very intensive ties with Austria, France, Spain. This is one of the initiatives based on ULEAD framework, when local communities can look for partners abroad in the West. And this had shown a good new dimension for future growth. This is one of good bridges for cooperation and one of the ways to strengthen institutional cooperation. Our region is additionally focused on an attempt to become a treatment and rehabilitation center for Ukrainian military. We have a lot of military hospitals, like in Mykhailo, and we try to make a good use of the recreational resources that the region has. And in Transcarpathian, we have a huge number of relocated cultural and art treasures from all the regions of Ukraine. We had become a huge storage of the cultural heritage of Ukraine. When we started to discuss the resilience and cohesion and the scope of work of our platform in the region, people were a bit cautious and skeptic about that, but currently we see that they understand what it all is about. And this started with 2014, when first IDP started to arrive to the region, and it had become quite clear, quite strong now. The initiatives are focused in strong Valley communities like Uzhgorod and Mukacheva, but also we have the rather powerful work in high mountain communities. And one more aspect. We believe it is quite important that being a deep river and quiet harbor, Transcarpathia should not waste a good chance to become a bridge connecting Ukraine with the West. All the time we keep asking ourselves what has been done and whether enough has been done. This is about infrastructure, this is about railroads, how to connect together broad railway and narrow railway. When you think about Košice, Sigurd in Romania, checkpoints, finalization of Uzhgorod checkpoint, where a big volume of cargoes cross the border, and it remains under-equipped, and we have to finish it to make life easier for Lviv cross-border point. And about the relocation of capital. At the beginning, we had discussions about 500,000 of relocated people. In reality, we observe more than 200,000 people start to outflow from the region. Whether Transcarpathia will be able to become a new home for relocated people and businesses, which is even more important. This has to become clear within the next 6 months. Thank you, Dmytro. Thank you for your point of view. Thank you for pointing out to the main issues and to pointing out to the thing that IDPs, they are not just a problem, they are also a good resource for development of the region. Thank you for your remarks. Thank you for this international component, for pointing out to the need to create communicational chains with Europe. The deep rear and quiet harbor does not prevent the region from taking proactive stance and position. I am very grateful to all our speakers who presented a broad palette, a broad spectrum of situations which demonstrated huge differences that we have in Ukraine, but it also underscored the huge resistance to Russian aggression and full-scale war against Ukraine. Now, my question to all the participants in the virtual space, whether we have any questions towards our speakers. We have just some minutes to ask questions. You may either raise hand and ask a question, or you may write in chat in Zoom. The question or in the comment, quite interesting panel. What changes do we need further? The key issue is as follows: how to overcome a gap between the emergency situation and inertia which we observe in the activities of many state institutions, including the institutions at the local level. How to set priorities for the regions in a situation of deficit resources. So despite the potential and of resilience, cohesion, of volunteer movement, etc., today's discussion had revealed a lot of problems which seem to remain in a shadow. But when we observe this war till full exhaustion, we nevertheless understand that we hope to resolve this issue. Otherwise, despite all the heroism, we would not survive. Oleg? You try to resolve the issues of IDPs on the account of local population. We are terribly sorry, but we also want to survive. That's interesting comment. This is a topic for a separate discussion, by the way. And by the way, we have not all the regions represented here today, and we are going to continue this dialogue and these meetings. I would like to answer to Lutsk in brief. We have planned visits to the regions, in particular to Ivano-Frankivsk, which was not presented today. And there we had a chance to speak to local businesses, and we asked a question: how many jobs were created by relocated businesses, how many jobs were offered, how many revenues were offered to the local budget. And we found out what a fight, what competition currently exists for those relocated businesses, and the regions compete between each other, trying to create better conditions for relocated businesses, because they understand that relocated businesses are offer new resources, new potential. I would suggest separate for the discussion whether IDPs mean a problem or opportunity, and quite often we perceive IDPs in the Soviet light, like those who will request for something, while we have to think about them as opportunities. Looking back to the year 2014 and comparing it with today's situation, we obviously see how we have changed, how much more capable we had become. It is interesting to see how the regions they unite in similarities and differences. We have several types of we have features grouped in types, and actually today we observe the clusterization of the regions, which requires the cluster approach in looking for solutions. And we had also seen how the central authorities acted in and how the local population acted. We had seen the decentralized system of distribution of resources, and we have a horizontal types, network type of links, where local businesses, local authorities, local civil society, where they have more potential for joint action, the situation is more successful, and in those territories where they have least ability to interact, they have worse results. They may lead us to the new institutional and even legal framework, and this might be good information for future decisions. We see some communities living in a brighter future, and some communities living in the darker past. In terms of the next question, how to get involved into your platform, please write to us via social media and our website. Our initiative is being implemented by the Ukrainian Helsinki group, and we are also part of the project of building up resilience to the conflict via dialogue, which is being implemented with the financial support of the European Union. I would like to thank to all our colleagues, friends, contributors from all the regions of Ukraine for your interventions, for the ideas shared with us, for the views, for your analysis of current challenges, and for your understanding what we need to do next. I would like to wish to you all the victory, the peace, and resilience, which will allow us to overcome. And I'm happy to congratulate you with the approaching independence